Roman, I always think of the Prague Spring as one of the great post-Second World War festivals. It started in 1946 and has really been running through all sorts of difficult times in the Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia, as it then was, ever since. And I wonder what you feel that Prague Spring represents now, and what it is that, how it fits into that European space of great festivals.
Mm-hmm. It's great that you have mentioned the history of the festival, because sometimes discussing our modern history, we say that the Prague Spring Festival survived 2 coups d'etat and one invasion of foreign army. What is sadly very actual, considering what's happening at the moment in Ukraine. But it's good to mention that the festival was founded in a short post-war democratic period, but it's not so known that the communists succeeded to do the coup d'etat in 1948. So the festival had its free and interesting first 2 or 3 editions. And it's good to mention that Raphael Kubelik, the founder of the festival, had an idea to create a kind of a musical bridge between East and West, but of course failed later on when communists came to the power. But before that, the festival had great moments already in 1946 and 47, of course, as a number 1 on the promotional list. We are mentioning European debut of Leonard Bernstein in 1946 with Czech Philharmonic, and he gave also a recital. So it's great to mention this, and festival has profited later on from a very free cultural period of 60s in Czechoslovakia, and we may say that festival flourished at the beginning. Later on, maybe festival was a bit too influenced by influx of Soviet or Russian artists in the 50s. On the other hand, it's a paradox that also those references became famous, because almost all the artists who came to Prague in the 50s later on became enemies of Soviet system.
I mean, it's interesting going back to talking about your founder there, that Raphael Kubelik, in a way, his history explains the history of Europe. It's just an extraordinary history. And I see that you're actually starting the final concert this year with one of his works, because, of course, he was a composer as well as a great conductor.
Yes, and it's good to mention that he was a very, very self-critical composer, because he never pushed his own compositions, and his works are quite numerous. So he did a lot of things, including operas, but he never pushed his own things during his career, what is quite sympathetic. But shortly back to the festival history, in the 60s we had all stars of the world, including Karajan, Berlin Philharmonic. Everybody was here, and it went on also through this complicated period in the 80s. And we may say that the festival had a good starting position after the breakdown of the Iron Curtain, and my predecessor and me, we are just responsible to, let's say, to use the right way the tradition, and to let's say, to keep the festival on the rails, as Americans say, in the modern times, in a competition, because there are new festivals in Prague and the Czech Republic, and they are also very successful. But Prague is really a city that has a capacity to feed more festivals than just Prague Spring Festival, and Prague Spring Festival remains number 1 and a kind of a standard for other Czech festivals at the moment. And we are with a great optimism looking to the future, despite the fact that we had to survive 2 years of COVID limits. So we've changed the festival to the TV production.
I was going to say that this will be the first really live festival you've had, won't it, for a couple of years? And so it must be really rather exciting to be getting back to the live festival again.
Yes, it's true, because in 2020 we simply engaged a film and TV production, and we were completely online. Last year, 21, we already had few concerts with a limited number of members of the audience, but it was also more or less online festival. So we are very much looking forward to have a normal festival, but a normal festival in strange conditions, considering the political and strategic situation in the world. So again, history is complicated, but festival is used to that, I would say.
Yes. Well, I always think of the 1970s and 80s of the Prague Spring being still carrying that ability to cross the political divides, however difficult it was. And certainly when I started work in this business, it was always held up as one of those sort of beacons of how a bit of cross-curtain relations could carry on. Just wanted to go to this year's festival, though, for a moment. And before we talk about the concerts, of course, you don't just have the concerts, you have a big competition as well, don't you?
Yes, Prague Spring competition is quite interesting sibling of the festival, and it was also founded by Kubelik in 1947, 1 year after the beginning of the festival, and it's dedicated to the young artists who are at the beginning of the career, so young professionals with some age limits, 27 or 30 for some musical professions. And I would say that also the history of the festival competition is quite interesting, and having Rostropovich as the most famous winner of the competition in the 50s, it's also an important pillar of the festival, because we keep in touch with laureates of the festival, and they are kind of children of the festival, and many of them are interesting personalities living worldwide. And I have to mention that last year's South Korea is sweeping the positions of the winners. It has become really a superpower. So we have many South Koreans friends now.
But this year you do it by instrument, don't you? And this year's the various wind instruments. It's in a way it's the orchestral heart of the competition this year.
Yes, we have a bassoon and clarinet combination this year, and it's changing. It's a kind of we call it a mill. The professions are turning around. So this year we have this competition combination of clarinet and bassoon, and we are very much looking forward how it will be, and what kind of product, meaning the winners, it will bring to the world stages.
I always think of Prague Spring as, the Czech Philharmonic and now the Prague Symphony Orchestra and the big sort of great Czech musical monoliths, if you like. But of course, a lot of the festival is actually a chamber music festival, isn't it?
Yes, some years ago we have found out that chamber music is somehow a bit neglected by the audience, although we know that it's a kind of a basis for classical music. And we have implemented something what is called festival inside a festival. We have created the weekend of the chamber music to put a kind of emphasis on chamber music that is really interesting, and it's quite successful because we have 2 or sometimes 3 concerts per day on special weekend. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we are closing chamber music into the ghetto. The chamber music is spread through the festival, but this emphasis on one weekend is something what is indicating to the audience that Prague Spring is still considering chamber music as a pillar of its programming, and it's very important source of inspiration for everybody. And it's giving chance to the players who are not great soloists and who are not members of the orchestra, but who are on a high professional level, dedicating their career to the string quartet or piano trio and so on.
It's interesting, I think, the sense of continuity of the festival. I mean, how long have you been with the festival yourself?
It's a good question that is leading to philosophical considerations. I started in 2001, so this is my 21st festival. And in fact, I have to indicate that most probably this summer I will pass over the leadership to my successor, who is already my colleague. So it's time to pass the floor to somebody younger. And it's also influenced by the fact that last year I decided to speed up my political career, and I was elected as a member of the parliament. So the combination of MP and Prague Spring is quite complicated, and it seems to me that it's better to back up culture from the position in a parliament and to leave the executive position to younger colleagues.
I think it's extremely good to have people from the music sector in the parliament, I have to say. It's all too rare. Although actually some countries, of course, I mean, Croatia being a good example, have had composers as their presidents. So there's a chance yet. And of course, you've got a new government in Prague just now, haven't you? So it's all change.
Yes, and I'm pleased that I have played this very small role in that, because in fact, many people in our country was somehow frightened by influx of populism in not just in Central and former Eastern Europe, but generally in Europe. So I said to myself that it's time to do something against, and I'm very pleased that I joined a great coalition that is now has created a new government that is absolutely non-populistic and very, very rational and very pro-European and Euro-Atlantic, simply normal European government, and I'm proud of it. Of course, this is not a government composed of angels. They are normal people, but it's a normal government with all his mistakes, but it's not a populist government. I'm happy about it.
It was enormously encouraging to hear. I just want to go back to those 21 years that you've been with the festival, and how it might have changed. I mean, effectively, you've been directing the festival all this century, and from that start of the millennium to now, how has the festival changed, do you think? How has it developed in that time?
I would say that, of course, music itself remains more or less the same. Emperor Piano Concerto by Beethoven is still the same, and it hasn't changed. What has completely changed is the way we are promoting the music, and maybe the programming or structures of programs has changed. And what is, of course, the influence number one is the great use of internet and social media and social networks, and all these things have to be respected. And what has changed is also the fact that we are at the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century, and we already have great compositions made at the beginning of this relatively new century. So we have to create some space for new young composers and new young musicians. So all those things are influencing the festival, and I'm very proud that this year we are implementing another festival inside the festival. We call it Prague Spring, and Prague Spring is completely dedicated to the contemporary music, and I would say contemporary music without compromises. We are not doing sandwich programs, but we really have a weekend completely dedicated to the contemporary music. I'm very happy about it. That's very important. And as to the promotion of the festival, we have to use all available means of communications that are up to date. It's changing from one year to another, and we have to be very careful, because the music remains, but the communication with the potential audience has changed.
And going back over those 20 years, pull out a few of the things that you've programmed that you feel you're most proud of, things that you really are pleased that you've programmed, either commissions or soloists or particular combinations of music, anything you like.
Maybe all those things you have mentioned. I'm I have one example that I'm very proud of, and this is the fact that the great tradition of the opening concert, Prague Spring Festival, Smetana's Má vlast, was refreshed by guest appearance of world orchestras, including London Symphony Orchestra with Colin Davis, and a few years ago by Vienna Philharmonic with Daniel Barenboim. And I think that Prague Spring helped to world fame of this great composition. There's not a symphony, it's a cycle of symphonic poems, and it became a very popular piece being played worldwide and recorded again and so on. So I'm pleased that Smetana is somehow appreciated as he deserves. So this is just one small brick into the wall, but of course I'm very happy that we had a great series of compositions made for the festival, and we have created matinee concerts for young artists, and I think that we have created a good system of a new communication with the new audiences. So we are selling tickets online. We are simply online with all the capacity we can afford.
Tell me something about the newer composers, the young composers from now that you've worked with and that you will take forward as being quite pleased with.
Yeah, of course, I would like to mention two already established names, and we have made we have support their career, and this is Miroslav Srnka and Martin Smolka. Both of them are already internationally established composers, and I'm very pleased that Prague Spring participated in strengthening their career. And this year we are creating a space for very young Czech composers, students who will participate in the workshop that is a part of this Prague Spring weekend. And it's, I think, important for young artists to have a reference of the Prague Spring, so we are ready to create a space for giving a reference of a great festival.
And finally, as you said, your successor is going to be taking over in the summer. What would you like the Prague Spring Festival to be in 20 years' time?
I think what is important is to have a very modern marketing, to have a modern communication with not just audience we have, but also with potential audience. What is very important, that's what we do, is to have a close contact with the basic musical education. Thanks to God, I would say we have saved a great system of music schools, and so-called basic music schools is a system we are keeping, and it's now flourishing, and all great festivals in Czech Republic and all promoters are helping to this system, because children are future of our profession. It works very well, so I will be very pleased to have a festival in 20 years still taking care of basic musical schools, because otherwise we won't have musicians and we won't have audience. And I think what is also important is to take a look from the other side, not to overcome the measures of a high artistry by marketing manipulations, what is very often happening in pop music. So I think the musical quality remains musical quality, and it's very important to take care of the musical quality, and also take care of something what might be described as a human message, because great artists had always played an important symbolic role in a character of the nations, and sometimes they were helping to overcome historical problems countries and nations have. Of course, the comeback of Kubelik in 1990 is still a moment that is that remains deeply in our hearts. And Kubelik's quote saying, "I have left my country not to leave my nation," is something what is still in our hearts. And of course, very similar quotes we have with Bernstein and Rostropovich and many other artists. And I'm mentioning this because to be a great artist doesn't simply mean that I'm playing well or I'm writing good novels, but it's important to have personalities who are really something what might be described as a basic philosopher of humankind.
Just to finish off, I see one of the parts of the festival from my part of the world. You got the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra coming to play, and you finished the festival with the Vienna Philharmonic playing Dvořák's Sixth Symphony. And of course, Dvořák conducted his Sixth Symphony in Birmingham, and amongst the first violins at that time was Edward Elgar. So all the links across Europe still carry on.
Yeah, Elgar became quite a respected author in our country, and we know that he's maybe the greatest personality in Britain for speaking about the first half of the 20th century, and it's great to have already Elgar as an acquired author on the Czech musical scenes.
He modeled his orchestration on Dvořák's, so there we go.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
Roman, thank you very much for that, and very good luck with the political career now that the festival career is ended. I hope you won't forget us in the festival movement, and that we can indeed carry on thinking of Prague Spring as one of the great beacons of hope in the continent in the future.
I hope so, and it was a great pleasure to talk to you about. Let's keep in touch in future.